hoping that this will answer a lot of your questions. I know that everyone is stressed about this, is nervous about this, and I get it. Like, your lives are crazy, and we have been so impressed with all the work you've been doing during this crazy COVID time. I just want to let you know that I appreciate you guys, appreciate everything you've done, appreciate all the hard work you're doing, and we just want to ease your mind. It's all going to be okay at some point. Like, we'll figure it out. But this might be, it is a new process, so it's going to be a little bit stressful and a little bit difficult for all of us. But we'll work through it, and we'll work out the bugs, work out the kinks, and then we'll be able to get it done next year a whole lot easier. So let's go ahead and start on the PowerPoint. We still have a ton of people coming in, but I want to be conscious of your time because I know that you guys are busy. I don't expect this to take too long, depending on the number of questions you have, but I want to make sure we get through all the information. So I'm going to turn off my video now to save bandwidth, and we'll start in on the presentation. Of course. Okay. And there's my cat, who hasn't been in here in weeks. Okay, so I'm going to start off just by kind of reviewing a few things that we've talked about in the past. Things you need to know. So for a student to appear on Child Count, these are the things that the report looks at. So these are the things that Infinite Campus looks for. They want to know, number one, is the child enrolled in the district on the child count date? This year, thank goodness, it happens to be December 1st. December 1st does not fall on a weekend, which is awesome. So that'll save us some hassle. The student has to have an active and locked IEP in the district on the child count date. And the student has to have evaluation eligibility determination dated less than 3 years before the child count date. So they have to have a recent evaluation within 3 years. For the enrollment part, I'm just going to kind of break it down by enrollment and IEP and evaluation. So for the enrollment, the child must be actively enrolled in a non-excluded calendar within the district. So if you have a student that has an IEP and should be counted on child count, is receiving services, should be counted on child count, and they're enrolled in a non-excluded calendar, you need to enroll them. I'm sorry, they're enrolled in an excluded calendar. You need to enroll them in a non-excluded calendar. You can do that by making it an in enrollment or however you want to do it. But any student who's going to count on child count must be enrolled in an excluded calendar, in a non-excluded calendar. Sorry. Students on the child count report, IEP, these you guys pretty much know. The date has to be, the IEP has to be effective on December 1st, so the dates have to overlap December 1st. The status has to be A, AR, or I. If it's ER, they're not going to show up. And if you need to figure that out, then just call me. We'll talk through how to figure that out. Obviously, the IEP has to be locked. The primary disability has to be selected. There has to be a primary disability, and then be conscious of DD students who are older than 8. They won't show up on the report. And they have to have a special ed LRE setting. For the evaluation, this is nothing new. So there's nothing new in this one. date of eligibility determination has to be 3 years minus 1 day prior to child count. And they have to have the necessary information. They have to have a disability and a date of eligibility determination in theirs. Okay, out-of-state students. So if a student moves in from out of state just before the child count date, and this is not new either, we've talked about this a lot in the past, but if a student moves in from out of state just before the child count date, you're going to create a skeleton document, or you can call it skeleton, you can call it shell, but it's a document that only has the necessary information, and you're going to put in that information from the sending state. If you have it, just do the best you can. This, you're going to make it type transferred, and you're going to lock that. And then you're going to create an IEP, again, a shell or a skeleton document, pulling in the information from the eligibility determination document you just created. Again, put in as much information as you can from the sending. So the start and end dates of the IEP should be from the sending state if possible. Make sure you document in both the eligibility determination and the IEP that this is for child count purposes, and that you will be evaluating the student as soon as possible. And that should allow the student to be pulled on child count, assuming those dates overlap December 1. Now, once you've done that, you still have to determine eligibility determination, and you have 60 days to do that. But when you do that, you're not going to go back to the old evaluation document. You're going to leave that one alone because you need it to span December 1. So you're going to create the new eligibility determination document, and you're going to create a new IEP. And those will be put in place, and then those will be the ones that are pulled after that. But for December 1, you have to have a document that says the student was eligible on December 1st. Okay. So we've had some miscommunication about, we talked about reevaluations due to COVID. So what we found out was there were a lot of districts who were struggling to get kids in for reevals, students who were already receiving services, and their reevals were expiring. And some bigger districts had backlogs, some just couldn't get the students in. So we laid out some instructions for how to, if the students are already receiving services, for how to make sure these students still count, because they are receiving services, and so they should count on child count. Apparently there's been some miscommunication about that any new students could count as well. And Sylvia, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. So in terms of expired reevaluations, you'll hear an echo.
No.
Okay, good.
But I'll
keep going. Okay.
So I was hearing an echo.
You are okay. So in terms of reevaluations, the best way to move forward is with a review of records if you're able to. Yes, lots of echoes. Okay. I will hop off and hop back in, and we'll come back to this.
So you were hearing it even after I muted?
Yes, that was kind of strange.
That is strange. Okay, well, everybody else, please make sure you're muted, so that this doesn't continue to happen. But I will go ahead and talk about this, and then I'll let Sylvia get back on. So if you have students who have expired reevaluations due to COVID, because we understand COVID's an issue, it's a thing, and you're having trouble getting people in. Sylvia's back on. So I'm going to let you talk again and see if we can get rid of the echo.
Is that better? Is that better? No, no.
No, you're still echoing.
Okay.
Seems
okay.
like everyone speaking is echoing.
Yeah, everybody is echoing.
Was I echoing?
Amy, you're not echoing.
Okay,
But everybody
I
else
think I know what
seems to
the
be.
problem might be. Hang on. I'm going to unshare and share again. Okay, can you all see my slide?
Yes, your slide is up.
Is it still echoing?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It doesn't
'Cause
sound like it.
When I was sharing the music, I was sharing all the computer sounds. So anyway, it's fixed.
Okay, so I think this is better. I'm not hearing myself, so that's good. So in terms of any kind of reevaluation due to COVID, the best way to move forward is with a review of records if you're able to do so. In most cases, you should be able to have enough information to substantiate continued eligibility for a student who probably isn't changing categories or adding a new area. In most cases, you should be able to pull it off. Admittedly, there will be times where you absolutely have to have more information to be able to move forward with a reevaluation. And in those cases, those would be the ones that I could understand would be expired. We've heard lots of different things coming from districts. It is okay to prioritize evaluations based on biggest need. I've heard some districts prioritizing initials and then some of those reevaluations that maybe are just almost impossible to get without a full evaluation. If you've already received consent for a full evaluation and you need to move to a review of records, you could have an ARC meeting to call and inform the parent that you're going to move forward in a little bit different way due to the pandemic, and talk to them about your change. You don't actually have to have parental consent to move forward with the review of records, but you would need to notify the parent that you're moving forward differently because you got consent for something else and aren't doing it. There is, I've heard of lots of different, creative ways to do evaluations. I know that there are some vendors online that are trying to get, their evaluations more online friendly. I don't know that they're quite there yet, but I've heard lots of very creative solutions from districts. My personal favorite one was there was a psychologist who drove to a student's house and took some, desks and a big piece of plexiglass and some cleaning materials and set up a station right outside in the student's driveway and then cleaned it right in front of the parent and allowed the parent to clean it as well. And so they were able to, and they took PPE with them and everything, and they were able to kind of conduct the evaluation that way. And it made the parents super comfortable. If your teachers and your psychologists are doing things like that, please make sure you nominate them for the teacher of the year because that's way above and beyond the call of duty. But also remember that it's okay also to have, if your providers have comorbidities and things like that, or there's reasons that they can't do things like that, that's also okay. And you can move forward with a review of records. And if you have enough information to substantiate eligibility, but maybe you want additional information, it would be relevant to say, we've got enough information to substantiate continued eligibility. However, we'd like to know more. And so as soon as we can get back in person, we'll do a cognitive on them or whatever it is that you were missing that you needed to do. But you're going to want to track that. So make sure that you're writing down somewhere all of the kids that you had those conversations with that where, as soon as we get back, we're going to do something else and do more. And then that way, as long as you're tracking it, you'll be able to go back to those kids and find them and do those things. I hope that's helpful.
Sylvia, there was one question about formal observations and review of records, but I think you kind of just answered that.
Yes,
but-
you can do formal observations online. So it is okay to do like a Zoom observation for students. So it is okay to move forward like doing those, virtually. we realize it's not ideal and that you probably won't have the best data that you ever got, but you will have data. And so I think we are just wanting to make sure that you know that it is okay to do an online virtual formal observation.
Thank you, Sylvia. Yeah, so just remember, if you have any questions, enter them in the chat. We didn't have any questions come to us previously. Debbie Watson Rose asked if you can address initials, Sylvia.
Absolutely. Happy to. So in terms of initials, I think there might have been a little bit of confusion after the last webinar about how to build a shell and whether or not you can include children with initials on child count. And the answer to that question is that you can't include them. And it really comes down to, there's a regulation, it's 707 KAR 1320, and of course I'm gonna have to give it 2 seconds to find it. It's section 1, number 4A. So that one says an LEA shall ensure the IEP is in effect before specially designed instruction and related services are provided to a child with a disability. So when we think about child count, it's important to remember that child count's all about who's receiving special ed and related services on December 1. By definition of that regulation, they would not be receiving special education and related services because they don't have an IEP in effect. The only way you can get an IEP in effect is by determining eligibility. And so if you have not done that yet, then you will not be able to count those children on child count. So please remember that in terms of initial, you won't be able to build a shell for a student who has an initial evaluation, which is one of the reasons that a lot of districts are prioritizing initial evaluations, is to get as many of them done before child count as possible.
So the question is, for example, and you may have addressed this, I'm not sure. For example, new potential students that have little evaluation pieces, example, preschool students, what if we can obtain enough of the evaluation pieces to establish eligibility?
Sure. If you can obtain enough of those pieces to establish eligibility, then it would be okay. You just can't do a review of records because that's only available for reevaluations. But you could potentially use whatever evaluation pieces you're able to obtain. If you're able to obtain enough pieces to establish eligibility, then that would be okay.
Okay. So here's how, for those students who are already receiving services and you just can't seem to get them in for whatever reason for reevaluations because of COVID, these are the instructions, and it's really very much like students moving in from out of state. So you're just going to create sort of a shell or a skeleton evaluation. Use the date you created the document, because you want to make sure it's good before December 1. You're going to use transferred as the evaluation type, and you want to do that for any sort of temporary or skeleton documents. You want to use transferred. And then you're going to complete a record review when possible, but if you can't, or if you can't determine all eligibility, then you're just going to document that a full evaluation will be completed as soon as possible, as soon as you can get the student in. And then you're going to enter that information, that documentation that says, this is because of COVID, we're going to complete the evaluation as soon as we can. Put that in the multidisciplinary report so that everybody has it in the same place. And then you're going to create, if the IEP is expired. If it hasn't expired, you're good. As long as it goes through December 1st, you're good. But if it has expired, you're going to go ahead and create a shell IEP for that one as well. And just make sure in the IEP you refer to the previous one in the documentation so that everybody knows, everybody can go back and look at that old IEP. And
There's a
then,
question, I'm sorry, Amy, there's a question
sure.
about DD students, and would we use transferred even if the student is in our district but has an expired IEP or eval?
Transferred, Kenny, transferred is more just sort of a signal to say, that's a really good question. I think it's more of a signal to say this is temporary, I guess. That should have been a better word than transferred, but just as long as we can keep things going. This is really just an IC sort of workaround. As far as students turning 9 and the eligibility has changed from DD, Sylvia, you got anything to say about that? Question mark?
Will you repeat it?
Yeah, students who are turning 9 and had a DD eligibility, and so their DD eligibility is changing.
I think we had talked about that in the last webinar. What didn't we?
I think what we decided was,
Yeah, I remember what we decided. I just wanted to make sure that we talked about it in the last one.
yes, we
So
did.
if your student is 9 and their eligibility has to change from DD, we're suggesting, and we realize that this is not the ideal situation, but it is what we can do. It's important to remember before I tell you this, that like we're basing, we make all these decisions based on the needs of kids, not necessarily based on the limitations of Infinite Campus. We know Infinite Campus has some limitations, that this is the best we can do to work around them so that kids still get services and you don't have things expiring. So the best way to go about that is by creating a shell with the suspected disability instead of DD. No, because you've already met with parents. The question is, do we have to meet with parents to do this? The answer is no, because you've already done that. You've already, through your, like when you're going to determine eligibility in another area, you've already gotten consent to determine eligibility for whatever disability it is. So should you suspect SLD, build a shell saying SLD instead of DD. And if that changes, you can always change it whenever you do the full evaluation and you get to that piece. But in this case, you're just going to have to build a shell with whatever the most likely eligibility category you think is going to be. Is able to be changed later. So don't stress out about that. We realize it's not ideal, but that's the only way to get around it without the student aging out.
The key here is documentation.
Yes,
Just
I would
make sure-
agree.
Yeah.
Better to document than anything else, and just explain the reasons why you did what you did.
Yeah, we realize that this is not ideal, and anytime you're dealing with a computer system, it's not human, and it doesn't understand COVID. But we still want to make sure kids are receiving services, and you're getting the money to help those kids receive services, or to provide those services. So yeah, we're doing the best we can with what we have, so that we continue to do what's best for kids. Okay, so again, we're just gonna continue to document that a full evaluation and corresponding IEP will be completed as soon as possible. Sorry. And then just tracking those kids will be the hard thing. So I'm gonna show you a report in a few minutes that will help with that. Okay, common errors we see in child count. Common errors, and again, I'll show you a report that will help us find those. Status, disability, or setting is blank. For some reason, they go away. Status is set to something other than A, R, or I, like if it's eligible parent refused. And if you use amend to end, that shouldn't be an issue, as opposed to unlocking and ending the IEP, but sometimes it is. PDFs, if everything is in PDF, the system won't recognize it. So you need to make sure, if the only way you can get documents is through a PDF, that you put that information into an editable document, so that that can be pulled from child count. LRE and age mismatch. So all 5-year-olds, I have 5-year-olds in kindergarten, but all kids in kindergarten through grade 14 should have an LRE code beginning with 6. Again, I'm going to show you some ways to find those students. Students are in excluded calendars. That's the biggest issue we're finding right now is people emailing us saying we have an entire school that's not showing on child count. That's because they're in excluded calendars. So you need to work with whoever in your district has control over those calendars and figure out either how to get the kids with IEPs enrolled in a non-excluded calendar or unexclude the calendars that may be excluded. One other thing that you might see if kids are showing on one report and not on the state report that I'm about to show you, it could be that those students have enrolled in other districts. And so we have a sort of a pecking order of how we pull kids. So basically, if a kid is enrolled in 2 different districts, the in enrollment, which is for special ed only, is going to be first. I probably should have put this in a slide. The primary enrollment, if there is no in enrollment, it'll look at the primary enrollment. Next, and then it'll take the secondary enrollment if there is no N or P. If they have the same enrollment type in 2 different districts, we're taking the latest enrollment date. So if a kid is enrolled in a district from August 24th through December 4th, and then they enrolled in another district on November 30th, then we'll take the one that they enrolled in on November 30th because that's the more likely place where the student is spending December 1. So, anyway, I guess my point is, if you have a student that's not showing up and you're not sure why because they're showing on other reports, call me and we'll work through it. I'll work with the other district or whatever we need to do to figure it out.
Amy, there's a question in the chat and I can address it. I just wanted to take some time to do it. So the question is, are you saying that there doesn't need to be an ARC if the reeval has expired and we're inputting a shell for child count purposes? Is this different than needing a conference for changing record view rather than full reevaluation? Yes, because you got consent to do a full reevaluation. And so you have to explain why you're not going with that way, because that would be considered a programmatic change. So it would require an ARC meeting. In terms of the expired reevaluation, there's kind of 2 answers to that. So, before your reevaluation expires, I would suggest that you consider, connecting with parents and having an ARC meeting to just kind of explain that we know that we're over the evaluation time frame. We are going to, explain your plan for providing compensatory education if you need to do so. So yes, you should have a meeting to say, hey, we're over the timeline. However, there is no requirement to have a meeting just to build a shell because nothing's changing for the student. It doesn't change any programmatic thing. It's not programmatic or non-programmatic. In fact, it's not really considered a change to the student's program. You're not really changing anything based on the shell. It's purely for child count. And as soon as child count is done, you'll proceed as you typically would have. So because it's just for child, just for the sole purpose of building a child count shell, there is no need to have an ARC meeting. However, if you haven't met with the parents over a reevaluation that's expired, you're going to want to have a conversation with them about what your plan is to get it done, where you are in the process, how you're going to make up for lost time. Those kinds of conversations should happen with the parents, but they're not, those 2 things are not necessarily related. You don't have to have it to build a shell, but you would want to have one to discuss kind of what your plan is for the missed reevaluation.
Good deal. Thank you. So child count cleanup, this is kind of the same thing that was on the previous one. Just make sure all your students, if they're not ages 3 through 21, they're not going to be on there. Age and grade should be an appropriate match. Preschool students should have REs that begin with 3. Kindergarten kids in K through 14 should begin with 6. Please, please, please make sure demographic data is correct. This is messing with our other reports, because when a student changes demographic data, if they change race during the school year, or when you guys get your reports and don't like what you see, that really messes up all our other data. It's messing up our discipline data, it's messing up enrollments, it's messing up all kinds of things. So please try to make sure your student demographic data is correct. And then ensure overlapping enrollments are resolved. So if you have overlapping enrollments with another district or whatever. Sylvia, do you want to address that question? Or do you want to not? Is it okay? Okay. Kenny said, can you explain what the effective date and the effective date of the current year mean when there are errors on the extract summary? So the effective date, if I'm understanding you correctly, the effective date is in child count. No, it's not a rookie question. I'm just trying to figure out. I think what you're asking, and let me bring up. Okay, so when I go to run child count, the effective date is this date right here. It defaults to 12/1. But you can change that date to whatever you want. I could change it to today if I wanted to run it. There are some issues still with that report, pulling for the effective date. If the effective date is not December 1st, that will be fixed next week, I think. So I'm excited about that. The effective date of the current year just means make sure you're looking at, I guess, if I'm understanding correctly, make sure the year is set to the right one. If you're looking back to a previous year, you have to go to list by year and pull it for that year. If you have any other questions, you might want to email me and we can talk, or call me or something and we can talk. I'm not sure if that helped her. Okay, good. Okay. Okay, so helpful reports in IC. We have 3 main kind of reports. I mean, they're broken down into parts, but the first one is the IDEA December 1 federal submission validation, and it says it'll be populated Monday. It is populated today, from what I've been told, but when we populate this, the data is only good as of the previous Monday. So whatever went in today is what happened, is what we pulled Sunday night or Monday morning, which means any changes that have happened during the week will not show up in this report. But we're excited that that's up and running, and I'm going to show you that. And then we have a QA SPED report, and then of course the IDEA December 1 count extract. Okay, so for the child count process, basically the IDEA Federal Submission Validation Report is the main, that's the main report you're going to be looking at. That is the data that we have for you. And basically what you have to do is look at that and say, yeah, that's accurate, or no, that's not accurate. And if it's not accurate, kind of see if you can figure out why. Now, this data that we run actually comes from your IDEA December 1 count extract. We run it from the district edition, except that if there are overlapping enrollments, those will be taken into account. So those kids may not show up, but otherwise it should be the same. So you want to run the IDEA December 1 count extract on Monday and compare it to what we have. Also, the QA SPED report would probably be helpful as well. And then we're really hoping to have this done by December 7th. So on December 7th, we're hoping that everyone's data is good and we can just move on with life and everybody will be happy. So it is only refreshed on Monday each week because, and actually yesterday it was blank, it was empty, but it will be refreshed on Monday each week from this point on through December 7th until we have an accurate count. So if it's after, we may need to do it again on the 14th, hopefully not. But because when we run this, we're running it from a reporting warehouse where we pull the data from the district. We pull the district data and store it again, and then we run reports against it. So the district data will only be as good as what you had on Monday morning. Okay, so the first report that I'm going to show you is the IDEA December 1 federal submission validation. And there's an aggregate report, and there's also a detail report. So the aggregate, this is what the aggregate looks like. So there will be no data to upload to the DOS Secure file server. There will be a survey just like we do with the discipline data and the exit data. It'll probably be a little more involved just because this data is so important for funding purposes. I'll probably ask more detail. Probably what I'm going to ask is, I'm going to ask you to enter the data by how many students you have for each disability category. That's probably what I'm going to do. And so when you run this report on Monday morning, this is what you're going to see. You run your December 1 count report at the same time and see if they match. If they do, and you feel like everything's good, life is good. And this breaks it down, in a lot of different ways. It breaks it down by race. It breaks it down by age group, kind of, or, well, I guess LRE setting, really, pre-K and K through 14. It breaks it down by disability. So it gives you a lot of good information, but it is aggregate. So the other report that is available here is the detail report. And these are live now. So you can go look at these. You can look at last year's data as well in the 2019-20 school year. You can look at I think the 18-19 is also there, if I remember correctly. And this will be updated Monday morning before you get to work. So this is what the aggregate looks like. So it actually gives detailed information about each student on the report. Now again, this is students. These are all students who have all the right things in place, right? So on Friday night, before we run the report on Sunday night or Monday morning, I recommend on Friday night you go in and make sure everything's locked up, make sure everything's there. And I'm going to show you an error report that'll help you with that. But because people are concerned about keeping kids. This report is the IDEA, what's it called? The validation submission, federal submission validation detail report. You want to make sure everything's locked up on Friday night so that when we run it on Monday, everything's good. People are concerned about keeping people out. If everything is locked the Friday before, then we should get accurate data on Monday morning. And then if throughout the week things change, because I realize things change, people go in, unlock things, whatever, then that's okay, because again, on Friday, you can go back in and lock everything up again. If a kindergarten's LRE is still a 3 instead of a 6, do you have to do an ARC to correct it? Or I'd sent that information out in a previous email. I'm trying to remember. It can be a non-programmatic change because it's just a code. Okay. So, back to this. So this is the data that we actually have. This is the data that if we were to submit today, this is what we would submit. We're not submitting today, so nobody panic. But this is what we have for you guys. The December 1, the IDEA December 1 count extract, that's the one you guys are used to running, and that's where we get our data, is we get it from your district's December 1 count extract. And again, if a student is on this report but not on the federal submission validation report, then you've got an overlap in enrollment somehow, and we need to work that out. So call me, because I'll have all that information. Now, the QA SPED report. So there are still just a few issues going on, as I mentioned earlier, with the child count report. And again, they'll be fixed on Wednesday. But in the meantime, if you're having trouble making sure that all your students are on there, then the QA SPED report is another answer. If you guys don't see the federal validation report, you're going to have to ask your cases administrator to give you access to it. The rights have to be turned on for that, I believe. Okay, so for the QA SPED report, the detail report, I'm going to show you an example of this. We've added some things. We've added caseload managers. We've added due date for next evaluation. We flag evaluations of type transferred. So these kids that are not, that are in there where you have a shell because of the COVID reevaluation situation, it'll let you know that so that you can go back in and find those kids again later. And we have IEP begin and end dates. So this is what that looks like. I've highlighted the new information. So it's got student SSID, last name, first name. This is all the new information: IEP begin and end date, evaluation due date, evaluation type. I don't know if I have any transferred on this one. Oops. Apparently I forgot to change that. And then LRE. So this is one thing I want to show you. This report looks like a lot of information, but for example, one of the questions is, how do I determine if I have 3-year-olds with, or I'm sorry, 5-year-olds in kindergarten with an LRE of beginning with 3? So this report is going to help you do that. So you're going to turn on your filter, which is under sort and filter. And if you have questions about this, I can send you instructions on it. You turn on your filter, and then you're going to go over to the least restrictive environment. And you are going to filter. You want to look at only kids that have an LRE beginning with 3. So I'm going to uncheck all these. So now I have all kids that have an LRE beginning with 3. If that's the case, then I should only be seeing students in preschool, right? 99, 98, 97. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to look at the grade level, and I'm going to sort ascending, and I see I've got some first graders with LREs beginning with 3. I've got some kindergartners, and then I've got some preschoolers. So these kindergartners and first graders are the ones you need to be looking at. So I can send those instructions if you want. But that's just an example of what you can do with this report. This report has all kinds of really good information if you just know how to filter and sort. So, but I'm really excited about this information, about this report and having all this data on it. Okay, so I will send out an email to everyone on how to find those students. And if you have other questions like that, let me know. Okay, so now the other really good report that's going to help you, this is what you want to do on Fridays, is look at this QA SPED error report. This will tell you any unlocked IEPs, any IEPs with missing data, overlapping IEPs. So these are the ones you want to look at on Fridays and say, okay, well, my people went in and unlocked stuff all week long, and so now I got to go back in and lock them. So you click on this, and it'll actually tell you that did not happen the way it was supposed to. Dang it. All right. There it is. There it is. Okay. So this report will tell you this IEP is unlocked. And if you scroll to the right, it gives you the student's SSID. And over here, it gives you lots of information. And there is one row for each error. So it might be unlocked, have a primary disability missing, and have an LRE missing. So if that's the case, you'll have one line for each of them. So you go over here and you look and see this student has an unlocked IEP, and then you go to the right. You see that it's unlocked, and then maybe, other things going on. And then to go in and lock those IEPs. So if an IEP overlaps December 1, that can be a problem. Otherwise, it's not good. It will kind of mess up some reports, but it won't affect child count for the most part. If you cannot find the federal validation report, it has to be added in the rights. You're going to have to talk to your cases administrator for that. It's because it's a new report, you may not have rights. But this is what I would recommend doing. So whatever happens during the week, this is where you go on Friday to say, okay, we're going to lock these things up now. Or we're going to make sure this student has a primary disability because he didn't last week for whatever reason, or we did an evaluation and we need to make sure everything's cleaned up, or whatever. The other question I've gotten a lot that I didn't put in this presentation is any IEPs that come due December 1st or 2nd through December 7th. Any of those IEPs, they don't affect child count because the child count only looks at IEPs on December 1st. No matter when we run this report, if I run this report next February, it's still going to look at IEPs as of December 1st, 2020. So that's another question I've gotten a lot is, has the child count date changed? The date we're pulling the data has changed. It used to be December 15th. It used to be that everybody had until December 15th to submit the data. This year, we're hoping to have it done by the 7th, but no matter when we run the report, it looks at the IEP and enrollment on December 1st. So anything that happens after that, any new IEPs that get created after that will be relevant for the next child count, not for this one. It won't even look at it. Okay. Oh, okay, so that's it for child count. I have a couple of other sort of pieces of information for you. Are there any other questions that you have? So again, you need to have access to the federal submission validation report. Overlapping IEPs, if the IEPs overlap on December 1, the kid's going to count twice on December 1, which is not okay. So that's an issue. And we will be looking for that at our level, but you need to look for it at yours as well. And that's really it. If IEPs overlap and you're running a report for that day, the kid's going to be on there twice. That's the only issue with overlapping IEPs, regardless of what the report is that you're running. So, so you need access to the federal submission validation report. I would use the QA SPED report, SPED error report on the weekends to clean everything up. Use your federal validation report, check it on Monday, see if it's good. I don't know if you guys, and you know, if you guys still have a ton of IEPs that still need to be developed or whatever, you know, waiting until November 30th is stressful for everyone. And I realize sometimes it can't be helped, but I wouldn't recommend doing that if you can help it. Let's see. How can we go in and end date the IEP? You can either use amend to end, which is what I would recommend, or you can just unlock it and end it. We prefer you use amend to end, and the instructions are in the data standards on how to do that, or you can email me and I'll send them to you. Auto end and auto end will be corrected next week. So the issues with kids not showing up, students, we had some issues with private school service plans not showing up. We had some issues with the warning error for students who are 5 years old in kindergarten showing up as errors with an LRE of 6. And then the auto end will all be corrected, hopefully on Wednesday. And yes, it is perfectly fine for staff to go in, have ARC meetings, create new IEPs for December 2nd through 7th. That is perfectly fine. Because those don't affect, as long as you don't go and unlock the old IEPs or whatever. And if you do, just knock them back. But just leave the documents intact that overlap December 1st. Okay. So I'm really excited about this process once we get it down. I think it's going to be good. I think this way you guys you'll know exactly what we're counting, and you don't have to, you know, wonder, and if you have to fill in that information somewhere else, you know, you can just go back to Infinite Campus and look it up. Another piece of information I'm really excited to share is the goal monitoring, the progress monitoring, goal monitoring tool in Infinite Campus. We met with Infinite Campus earlier this week, might have been yesterday, and they said that printing and graphing will be available in the goal monitoring tool in the December update, so mid-December-ish. So I'm really excited about that, and it looks good. So yeah, that's going to be helpful for you guys. Our unlocked documents affecting reports. So I don't think unlocked documents appear on the QA SPED report. But oh yeah, if documents are unlocked, students won't appear on reports. Documents have to be locked in order for students to appear on child count or on other reports. So yes, it does affect it in that way. Okay. They appear on the QA error report. That's right. Thank you, Kim. They do appear on the QA SPED error report, letting you know that the IEPs are unlocked, but also the evaluations have to be locked as well. Actually, I think the evaluation has to be locked in order for the IEP to pull the eligibility determination document. So, okay, so we're right at 10 o'clock. We've had a few technical difficulties, but I think I'm hoping I answered some questions and eased your mind. I don't know. If you have questions, feel free to email me. You know, I'll send out an email on Monday. I'll send out an email on Monday, letting you know that when the reports have been updated in the IDEA submission validation report, when that data has been updated. I don't know that I don't recommend getting into, well, I'm going to say I don't recommend getting into SPED documents. Right. I recommend that you try to keep people out of the SPED documents, but sometimes it's necessary. So I'm not saying it's going to mess everything up, but once people are in, things accidentally get unlocked, things change. So I would just recommend that you try to keep any documents that affect child count sort of intact. Yeah, so running it every Monday it's just a suggestion. So the issue is the fact that we're running this on Mondays. December 1st happens to be on a Tuesday this year. So the first accurate count we're going to get after December 1st is December 7th. So once everything is in place, I mean, we'll pull it on Monday, November 30th, but I have a feeling that a lot is going to change on November 30th. I think it often does, based on what I've heard from a lot of districts. So we won't be able to pull it again until December 7th. So again, just make sure those documents that affect December 1 stay intact, stay locked. And if you can do that, you're going to be good. Is there a report in IC that will give us a complete list of SPED students regardless of errors? So I think a combination of the IDEA December 1 count extract or the QA SPED detail report, those should be close to identical. One of those two and the QA SPED error report should give you a list of all your students. Because the SPED error report will give you the ones with the errors. And the IDEA December 1 count extract should give you all students, and then you have the error report at the beginning. But I would run the detail report too, just to make sure everything's matching up, just to be safe. So I realize it's a lot, but I'm trying to give you as much information as I can. I would start off running the validation report, looking at it, if you feel like your stuff is in order. If not, I would run the detail report and the QA SPED error report and look at those kids and take a look at those and compare it to what is in the validation report. Tracy says you can also run an ad hoc by school or district that lists all SPED students and compare that to caseloads by teacher. And that's a good idea too. That's one thing that I don't address because honestly, I don't have access to that report. And so I can't train on it. But the caseload report or the caseloads for each teacher is also a very helpful way to look at things and make sure kids aren't getting sort of falling through the cracks. Okay. QA SPED error or detail report or IDEA December 1 count extract QA SPED error report. The quick reference card linked to the QA report is a good resource. Thank you, Greta. I appreciate that. Let me see if I can find that. So QA report, QA SPED. This is a quick reference card that Greta is referring to, and it has a lot of information in it. If I need to do a webinar just for newbies, just for people who are brand new to this process, I'm happy to do that. If you want that, send me an email and I'll get a group together and we can do that. Because I realize I'm throwing a lot of information at you and it's stressful. So, any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, again, I thank you for your time. I sent out this PowerPoint to you, but if you have any other questions, I also will today send out information on how to find the 5-year-olds in kindergarten who have inaccurate LREs. And again, that can be done with a non-programmatic change. Just make sure you communicate with the parents because it really is just a code. You should have, the LRE is actually what's written in the LRE section. So, all right. Well, thank you for your time. I'll hang out here, but I'm gonna let you guys go. If you have questions, you can hang on and ask them.